We're all likely familiar with the frustration that builds when things don't go our way. Your heartbeat quickens, muscles tense up, and discomfort grows until it almost feels like you're about to explode. When our self-control snaps, anger surges like a flood, sweeping away everything in its path. There's often a sense of relief afterward, almost as if releasing anger is the best way to manage it, right? But while it may seem like a positive release, science tells us that venting anger isn't a healthy coping strategy. In fact, expressing anger might worsen the situation, leading us to actions we later regret. In our culture, anger is often glorified. Look at movies and TV shows where protagonists exhibit their fury as acts of heroism. Strong female leads or hyper-masculine figures confront their enemies with rage, and violence becomes the solution. Anger is seen as a sign of righteousness, especially in today's outrage culture, where shouting, "How dare you?" into a microphone is framed as activism. We're taught to see anger as powerful, as a force for change that helps us get what we want, and a legitimate, effective way to express dissatisfaction. We often treat anger like therapy, believing that by letting it out, we relieve the pressure like a steam engine. This leads us to justify venting in various forms, all while admiring anger for its supposed usefulness. But should we really believe this? Instead, we should stop indulging in anger and focus on preventing or reducing it from the beginning. There's an old Buddhist story of a demon who visited a temple. The creature caused chaos, frightening the monks, who responded with fear and anger, shouting and cursing in an attempt to drive it away. But with each hostile reaction, the demon grew larger and more terrifying. When the head monk returned and saw the situation, he didn't respond with anger or fear. Instead, he calmly welcomed the demon with compassion. To everyone's surprise, the more kindness the monk showed, the smaller the demon became, until it disappeared entirely. This Buddhist approach to anger can feel odd in a culture that teaches us to fight fire with fire. But from a Buddhist perspective, anger only feeds more anger, escalating the problem. Buddhism views anger as an obstacle to enlightenment, classifying it under ill will. The Buddha discouraged anger because it's a destructive emotion that leads to suffering. When we're angry, our judgment is clouded, and we often act in ways we later regret. Anger distorts reality, causing us to react impulsively, often destructively, with a warped perception of the world around us. Stoic philosopher Seneca had a similar viewpoint in his work on anger. He described anger as a temporary madness that can lead to dangerous actions, and argued that it's better to prevent anger from arising in the first place. Seneca also criticized Aristotle's idea of useful anger. He believed that anger is never helpful. There's no situation in which reacting with anger yields better results than responding with reason. Even in war, anger does more harm than good. For the Stoics, anger doesn't come from reason. A rational person would recognize that nothing is truly worth getting angry over. As such, a well-trained Stoic rarely succumbs to anger because allowing anger to rise means betraying reason. All this suggests that expressing anger can lead to irreversible damage. We risk losing friends, straining relationships, and causing others to distance themselves from us. While venting may bring a temporary sense of relief, it often comes with a hefty price. But what if venting doesn't hurt anyone or destroy relationships? Could it still be a good idea in a controlled environment, like a therapeutic setting, to release negative emotions? Didn't the Buddha himself acknowledge that sometimes an outburst of anger can purify and help us feel better? According to the Buddhist monk Ajahn Sona, anger is a form of unwise attention to faults. Its root is aversion. We simply dislike our current situation. We want to push it away, we want it gone, or worse, we want to destroy it. Anger is always accompanied by a feeling of discomfort, a negative weight. Ajahn Sona emphasizes that venting, even with the intention of release, is still anger in action. You're not truly relieving anything, you are experiencing the full force of anger, so overwhelming it makes you want to scream or break something. This connection between anger and impulsive behavior is critical. Sure, the feeling may subside afterward, but what you've really done is prime yourself for more future outbursts. Ajahn Sona also argues that the relief we feel after exploding in anger is not because we've purged the emotion, but simply because the painful feeling of anger has temporarily faded. So why should we trust the teachings of monks or philosophers? What's fascinating is that modern science aligns with these ancient views. Initially, it might seem logical to think that outbursts of anger can purify emotions. After all, venting feels like a reasonable solution after anger has built up inside us. Many people report feeling a sense of relief after an angry episode, as if they've returned to a more comfortable equilibrium, much like removing a toxin from the body. Anger is often compared to the need to relieve oneself. The only way to reduce the pressure is by releasing it. This theory is known as the catharsis hypothesis. The word catharsis comes from the Greek katharsis, meaning cleansing or purification. In this context, it refers to purging anger and aggression that have accumulated inside by acting out violently, whether it's smashing objects in a rage room or hitting a punching bag, all with the intent of achieving some sense of relief. This idea of catharsis originates in the work of Sigmund Freud, who believed that expressing repressed emotions could ease psychological tension. Freud's ideas led to the hydraulic model of anger, suggesting that it builds up like pressure in a system and must be released to prevent psychological damage. But does this theory hold up under scrutiny? Scientific research says no. Venting anger does not alleviate it. In fact, it often makes the situation worse. One of the first scientific efforts to test the catharsis hypothesis was conducted by Hornberger in the 1950s. In his experiment, participants were insulted with hurtful comments. One group was allowed to hammer nails for 10 minutes, while another group did nothing. Afterward, both groups were given the opportunity to criticize the person who had insulted them. The results showed that those who hammered nails became more hostile and aggressive than those who remained inactive. Subsequent studies echoed these findings. Venting anger doesn't reduce it, it amplifies it. A recent meta-analysis from Ohio State University, led by Sophie Kjærvik, examined over 150 studies involving more than 10,000 participants. This research made a distinction between arousal-increasing activities and arousal-reducing activities. High-arousal activities included intense physical exercise, smashing objects in rage rooms, hitting punching bags, or cycling vigorously, all common ways to blow off steam. Low-arousal activities included mindfulness, deep breathing, meditation, yoga, and other gentler practices like playful interaction. The research found that arousal-increasing activities were ineffective at reducing anger. Some, like running, even made the participants angrier. Brad Bushman, a professor at Ohio State University and an expert in communication, has spent years researching this topic. He stated, "I think it's very important to debunk the myth that when you're angry, you should let it out. Venting may seem like a good idea, but there isn't a shred of scientific evidence supporting the catharsis hypothesis." Bushman emphasized that while venting might temporarily feel satisfying, it only increases aggression. In an earlier paper, he compared venting anger to putting gasoline on a fire. It doesn't extinguish the flames, it only makes them burn hotter. So, pounding nails, punching bags, or screaming into pillows after being provoked can make anger worse. The worst way to handle anger is to imagine your enemy's face on a pillow or a punching bag and hit it. Yet, this is precisely the advice that many mainstream psychologists offer, Bushman notes. If followed, it only makes people more angry and aggressive. Bushman's findings reinforce Ajahn Sona's perspective. What we call venting isn't reducing anger at all, it's escalating it. In other words, venting is a misunderstanding of both the disease and its treatment. Ironic, isn't it? As these studies show, low-arousal activities are far more effective in managing anger. Practices like mindfulness, deep breathing, or light physical activity calm the mind, allowing us to regain control rather than letting our emotions spiral out of hand. Science, philosophy, and ancient wisdom all point to the same conclusion. Rather than venting anger, we should work on diffusing it. Venting may offer a fleeting sense of relief, but it's not a solution, it's a trap. To truly manage anger, We need to focus on calming the storm before it has a chance to rage. I believe that both Buddhists and Stoics would fully agree with this point. Instead of engaging in high arousal activities, avoiding them is a far better strategy. As mentioned earlier, practices like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, deep breathing exercises, and engaging in playful physical activities can help reduce anger. These activities calm us down and soothe our emotions rather than intensifying them. Instead of heading to a rage room, why not try joining a local meditation class? Instead of threatening to use extreme force, why not explore breath control techniques like the Russian martial arts systema? Researcher Sophie Kjærvik has highlighted that progressive muscle relaxation and relaxation techniques in general can be just as effective as mindfulness and meditation in dealing with anger. She argues that most low-arousal interventions are either free or very affordable, and they're easily accessible. You don't need to book an appointment with a cognitive behavioral therapist to manage your anger. You can simply download a free app on your phone or find a video on YouTube for guidance, Kjærvik points out. The allure of venting is strong. People always feel the urge to vent, as Bushman said. When frustration builds, the need to explode becomes overwhelming. Our bodies naturally respond to uncomfortable emotions by wanting to move or act out, much like when we touch freezing water and instinctively pull away. It takes self-restraint, and often practice, to avoid giving in to anger. But it's worth it. Considering the destructive consequences of venting, how it not only fails to reduce anger, but actually intensifies it, we need to be cautious about the methods that popular culture endorses. Hopefully, you found this video informative and valuable. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future content. Thank you so much for watching.